Chapter 150, The Bewitching Golden Light 1. Not long later, the group of people from the Xu sect walked out of the jungle and arrived at the mountain basin. There were a total of 8 of them, and all of them wore black robes embroidered with blood-colored sun. It looked bizarre, but the coldness from their bodies was especially obvious. This was especially so for their eyes that were covered by the robe. They would occasionally reveal cold gazes that had no emotions in them, as though the lives here were meaningless. That sense of indifference to death caused these rogue cultivators and non-humans in the basin to be on high alert. Even though the Sea Ghost organization had always been known for their cruelty, all of them were extremely wary now. Cruelty was also a part of human nature, but these people from the Xu sect were simply emotionless killing machines. As they walked over, the cold intent spread out and filled the entire basin. Many rogue cultivators' expressions changed and they ultimately chose to leave. The Xu sect didn't even glance at the rogue cultivators who had left. After they arrived, they sat down and didn't move at all. Xu Qing's gaze swept past these people from Xu sect. He didn't see the older brother of the little girl in the scavenger campsite back then, so he retracted his gaze and closed his eyes to meditate. As for the old man from Panquin Road, he didn't return to the boulder. He found a place to avoid the poisonous gas and sat there. He was vigilant against Xu Qing as well as against the other cultivators in the surroundings. At the same time, he was muttering inwardly. This kid agreed so quickly. He is definitely up to no good. Just like that, 10 days passed amidst the stifling atmosphere in the basin. In these 10 days, no sea lizards came. This phenomenon caused all the cultivators here to have a faint premonition. The waves on the surrounding sea also gradually decreased and became increasingly calm. It was as though a great storm was coming. It was the same for the cultivators around the basin. Everyone was in silence. Only the large snake beside the old man would often look at Xu Qing and make gurgling sounds. Xu Qing didn't understand and didn't bother with it. Instead, he kept himself at his peak state. He had cleaned the dagger and sharpened the iron stick. As for the alliance, he had only casually agreed. Xu Qing wouldn't trust the old man and knew that the old man also wouldn't believe him. The stifling atmosphere changed at dusk on the 11th day. The sea rumbled. After 10 days of peace, the waves seemed to have awakened from their slumber, stirring up violent waves. Waves of terrifying ore surged out of the sea and spread in all directions. When it filled the entire island, Xu Qing saw several vortexes appearing on the surface of the sea in the distance, rapidly approaching the island. Many cultivators noticed this scene, and most of them remained silent. However, their cultivation bases were all circulating and they were ready to make a move at any time. Very soon, the first vortex approached the shore. As the seawater rumbled and splashed in all directions, a huge purple-black creature that looked to be 500 feet in length emerged from the surface of the sea and stepped onto the beach. The afterglow shining on it made it look like its body was covered in a layer of treasure armor. This treasure armor emitted a dark light and looked extremely tenacious. At the same time, a pressure that far exceeded check condensation erupted from its body. The aura was so strong that the surrounding sand danced and spread in all directions. It was a foundation-building sea lizard. Regardless of whether it was the treasure armor on its body, the sharp claws on its limbs, or the vertical pupils of its eyes, they all gave off an endless killing intent. Moreover, it clearly had intelligence. After it got ashore, it shook its body and swept its cold gaze across the island. Finally, it looked at the basin at the top of the tallest mountain. A hint of disdain appeared in its eyes as it strode over. The aura was so strong that all the cultivators on the mountain peaks on the island felt their hearts tremble and their breathing became hurried. Their faces turned pale as though they were being suppressed. And there was more than one foundation-building sea lizard. After the first sea lizard, as the vortexes got closer and closer, the second foundation-building sea lizard also landed on the shore and stepped into the jungle. Next was the third sea lizard. As for the third lizard, its aura was even stronger. Its body was 1,000 feet long. As it stepped onto the beach, it roared at the sky. Immediately, a storm appeared in the surroundings, sweeping in all directions, causing the trees in the jungle to shake violently. Even the cultivators in the basin could sense the fishy stench from so far away. The suppression of the cultivation base was even more intense now. Even Xu Qing's pupils constricted as he sensed the terror of these 3 foundation-building sea lizards. From what he could sense, the first 2 were already very strong. As for the last one, he felt a faint piercing pain in his eyes just by looking at it. He gasped. His mind quickly compared the diamond sex ancestor to them. The answer after the comparison was that even the first 2 relatively weaker sea lizards could tear the diamond sex ancestor to pieces. To mid-stage foundation-building creatures, and the last one is actually at the late-stage foundation-building realm. The first 2 are worth 10,000 spirit stones, and the last one can be casually sold for 15,000 to 16,000 spirit stones. Xu Qing, let's really form an alliance this time. The eyes of the old man from Panquin Road shone as he spoke rapidly. The gazes of the cultivators around the basin also shone. Regardless of whether it was the sea ghost or the non-human races, their greed was stimulated. The temptation of tens of thousands of spirit stones was too great for cultivators like them. Xu Qing's expression was also solemn. He looked at the 3 foundation-building sea lizards walking over one after the other and felt an intense sense of danger. All the hairs on his body stood up at this moment and the skin on his body shivered slightly.